Hello, I'm Nathan Furr from the Brigham Young University Marriott School of Management. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series. Today our guest is Adam Robertson. Adam is currently engaged with a startup company called IMSAR. He is the program manager over NanoSAR, the world's smallest synthetic aperture radar. While completing an MBA at BYU, he co-founded and served as president of Precision Surveying Solutions, a provider of sophisticated electronic tools for land surveyors. Concurrently, he worked in venture capital at Cross Creek Capital and as a partner of Cougar Capital. Prior to his MBA, Adam worked as an engineering manager developing test and measurement equipment. Adam received an MBA and electrical engineering degrees from Brigham Young University. He's been married for 13 years and has 6 children. The Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology welcomes Adam Robertson to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series. Welcome, Adam. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you. This lecture series is an important part of what we do at the center, and we hope will be a resource for students here at Brigham Young University and worldwide. And so as part of that, one of my favorite things to do is just begin finding out about you and finding how you got into entrepreneurship. So maybe give us a little bit more depth on your background. Where did you start out, and how did you evolve into this crazy thing called an entrepreneur?
Well, I think my entrepreneurship tendencies started when I was pretty young.
Yeah.
My parents, when I talk to them, parents like to brag about their kids, and they always tell the story about being about 6 years old, and I had pumpkins I'd grown in the backyard. And I took my little red wagon out to the corner. We lived on the corner, and I just remember people stopping by, picking up pumpkins, and me running in back and forth to the house going, help me figure out the change. I don't know how to calculate this yet.
That's great.
I think that's where it started. When I was an undergraduate at BYU, my wife and I started a company. We looked at our assets. We had nothing. But we did realize that we had one skill that we learned very well from our parents, which was cleaning.
Okay.
We had a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
We had rags. We had a few things like that. We started a house cleaning business.
Okay.
And we ran that successfully and sold that before I left BYU the first time.
Wow.
Then when I came back for an MBA after some years in the workforce, I wanted to start something else and go at it again.
Cool. Great. And now we mentioned in your bio that you spent several years in electronics and equipment. Tell us a little bit more about that time and how that was important or not important to what you would eventually do.
Well, I think I spent a lot of years, to some degree, repressing my entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
I was 7 years in high tech in Northern California. I started out at a company called Hewlett Packard, which you're all familiar with, which spun off a large piece of their company into Agilent Technologies. And I just love technology. That's one thing I'm very passionate about. And this is exciting. I was working with world-class technology, lots of brilliant scientists and engineers. And 7 years there gave me a great depth of experience. I got to see how a world-class company like Hewlett Packard operates, how they function, see what they do well, what they don't do well. I got a lot of opportunity to see what customers really want, see how companies try and respond to that and develop. And I also got to see, I think a big turning point for me was I had a team of people I was managing, brilliant people. And we had some products we were selling at a very, very high value. And I wanted to expand and grow this business. And because of the particular division I was in, that was repressed. And I wanted to go and pursue that because we were making money hand over fist. And that was one of the things that kind of pushed me to go out of that big corporate box.
You know, it's interesting. Before we move on to kind of some of your entrepreneurial ventures, you mentioned a couple things I thought were interesting. One of them was you said you noticed how companies look at what customers really want and how they respond. Tell me more about that. What did you observe that they do or don't do?
One of the things I observed that they do really well is they go and spend a lot of time and energy going and interviewing the end customer, trying to figure out exactly what they want, and then in this case we're building a box that was going to solve more or less everyone's needs simultaneously. And that worked for most of the customers pretty well.
Yeah.
But a lot of the customers, their specific needs weren't met because it was more of a general solution.
Yeah.
I also saw that they did a great job, but they weren't super fast.
Yeah. Okay.
Their development cycles, because it was a very complex product, was multiple years. And some of the customers' needs couldn't be satisfied over that time frame. They needed to happen a lot faster, and they needed something next month or next week, not next year.
Yeah, okay. Those are good points, and the reason why I kind of started to poke on that is I think that's, you know, some of our other lecturers have highlighted how important it is to go out and talk to customers, go out and figure out what do they really want, and then you're bringing up this other issue, though, of this black box. I mean, it's great, the black box that solves everybody's needs. But does it really solve everybody's needs? And so there's also this issue as you talk to customers, you know, are you looking horizontal? And then that's a very general solution that solves everybody, a few, you know, few needs of most people, or are you going to go vertical and really solve the problem for a specific set of customers? So that's wonderful insight, thank you. So you're in Northern California. Oh, that's the other thing I love is, you know, you're in Northern California, Silicon Valley, and things are moving slowly. But that's, you know, big companies tend to move slowly by nature. So you're out there, you're working on that, you see this really neat product, and then you kind of feeling it suppressed. What happened next?
Well, I found some creative ways to deal with it.
Okay.
I tried to make a deal with my management team and said, hey, look, I'm making so much money on this, I want to expand it.
Yeah.
Tell you what, you just let me keep the money that comes in, and I'll use it to grow itself organically.
Yeah.
I won't require anything from you.
Yeah.
I'll just take the money. And they said, no, once it comes into the bucket, we get to decide what happens to it.
Yeah.
So I found another division who to pay the bill for me and hold the money, and then when I wanted the money spent, I would go to them and get it spent.
Okay.
So you have to find some really innovative entrepreneurial ways, sometimes even with a big company, to finance the things you want to get done.
Wow, interesting.
And that was working so well with that division that I did another thing with the same division.
Ah, okay.
Got another thing rolling. Again, same thing, extremely profitable. So your students will like this. A single CD that I would ship to a customer. How much does it cost to burn a CD? A few pennies? Well, it would send that CD and a bill for several $100,000.
Beautiful.
Great profit margins.
That's great. So it sounds like, and this is another really interesting point, is that you were able to be entrepreneurial within a big company. And sometimes I think students in general think, well, the only reason to study entrepreneurship or some of those skills is if I'm going to go start a company today. But those are skills that are really often required in big companies. They're always doing new products, new ventures, and the skills you'd learn to be able to pitch why this would be a compelling product are the same types of skills you would need as an entrepreneur, and those two can really overlap. And so
I agree. If I can leverage off of that, I'll give you another example. There was a product that we wanted to develop, really exciting. It's actually just came out of the market about in the last year. And my engineering team was really excited. I had a PhD, a guy who had been a professor at universities, incredibly intelligent, went and pitched it to the general management team.
Yeah.
It got shot down.
That's great.
I came in not fully knowing the history as a new manager over him, and I saw his idea and thought, this is fantastic. We've got to get this out there.
Yeah.
So I repackaged the idea. I gave it a new name, and I gave it a different pitch.
Yeah.
So a different angle on it, pitched up to the same management team, and went all the way up.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly sitting in front of a vice president of the company. He's about to sign off on approval to spend a bunch of money for this new product. And he says, isn't this the project that used to be named such and such?
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it is.
Yeah.
He says, great, I like it. The thing he canceled before went flying through just with the right pitch.
Yeah. Great story, and really, I mean, that's perfect. That's exactly right. So at some point you decided to jump and do an MBA. What made you want to do that? And then it sounds like during your MBA you did some fun stuff there. So tell us about that transition.
Well, the MBA transition, I think I'd wanted to for a long time go back to school for something, maybe a PhD, maybe an MBA.
Yeah.
And what turned the tables was I couldn't figure out what the accounting team was doing and why they were doing it at the big company.
Yeah.
And I was lost. I was an engineer, didn't really have any accounting background, no economics background. Yeah. So I went down to the local junior college, and I enrolled with a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, taking the entry-level accounting class. When I got done with that accounting class, I understood better than the vice president over me why they were doing some of the things they were doing.
Yeah.
It finally made sense.
Yeah.
And that was the real tipping point. As soon as I finished that class, I decided, hey, I'm going back to school.
Oh, cool. That's great. I love that you took the initiative, by the way, to just go out and say, how do I figure this out so that so I know what's going on. So you came back to BYU and you did your MBA. At the same time, you started Precision Surveying Tools. Tell us about where that idea came from and how you kind of eventually, how that evolved early on, and you kind of decided to make the leap and do this thing.
Okay. After about the first semester of the MBA, I decided that I really needed to go start a company. And well, why not just start right now? Why wait till I'm done with school? So I started looking for great ideas. Because of my agreements with my former company, I couldn't go along those same lines. I had agreements not to compete with them. So I choose something new. Well, I found someone who happened to be a BYU student named Tim Westman. He came out of the manufacturing engineering department. He had some great ideas. He had working prototypes. They didn't have any business know-how, if you will, and they really wanted someone to come in and help run the thing. So I met with him and another partner he had out of Ohio, and looked at the numbers. I researched the market a bit, did all the typical stuff you'd want to do in terms of due diligence for a company, and said, this has some real opportunity. I said, let's go, and we ran with it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How did you meet Tim?
I met Tim at a elevator pitch for the business plan competition. I was actually performing the role of the timekeeper for the elevator pitch. They have about a minute or so to explain what their company is. And he said what he was doing sounded really interesting to me, and afterwards I approached him and off it went. Yeah,
that's great. So, there's a couple cool themes here. One is you hooked up with somebody who had complementary skills, and that's one thing that can be really useful is meet up with somebody who's good in something you're not. Maybe, you're obviously an engineer, but, hey, he had some manufacturing design skills. Often, people who are good in design need to meet up with somebody who can do sales and marketing. And then you mentioned another great word, which is due diligence, which many of you may know what that is, but due diligence is basically looking into the fundamental attractiveness of the business. And that's, usually a couple key areas, like how big is the market? How expensive would it be to make this? Can I sell it to the market? So market, team, opportunity, those kinds of issues that, So you did your research too. I like that. You did your research on Precision Surveying Tools, and then you said, this looks good. So what happened next?
Next thing we wanted to do, there's several things that happened simultaneously. One is I thought, wow, that BYU business plan competition, there's some money at the end of that. I want that money. And we went for that. So that caused us to write a much more thorough business plan. We had a lot of people review it, which is very, very useful. So in general, having peer review and people who had been through the processes before, take a look at it, shoot holes in our plan, then we had to go back and fill those gaps up. At the same time, we began in earnest the manufacturability design aspect. So, who are we going to have this made? Is it going to be made in the U.S.? Is it going to be made in China? How many are we going to start selling? What's our advertising and marketing plan? So as we were developing the business plan, we were at the same time executing on it full speed.
How important is a business plan to a new venture success?
I think it's critical.
How come?
The reason why is not because of the plan at the end. It's all the thought process that goes into it while you're doing it. You think through things at so many different angles, different aspects, and then having other people look at it and they see, oh, you forgot about competitor X, and they can come in and wipe you out, or whatever it is that they're talking about. I didn't know much about print advertising. It turns out almost all of my initial advertising was in print magazines. I didn't know, who do I advertise with? What should the advertisement look like? How much is it going to cost? How am I going to fund paying for that?
That's great. Did your business plan change as the company, after you launched the company, or did you just stick to that plan like it was scripture?
We absolutely changed it. It had to change. I think what we find out in pursuing what we thought was reality. Our paper reality wasn't the same as the actual reality.
Right, yeah.
So we had to adapt and change.
Yeah, that's great. I like you, Adam. You're perfect. It's a great point. You know, I like when you said business plans, it wasn't necessarily the end product that was the most important. It was the process of answering all the questions people had and figuring out what the gaps and the holes were, and then, of course, evolving it. And that's really the true value of the business plan, is making you think through it more methodically and figure things out. By the way, precision surveying tools. I mean, surveying seems like it's a pretty well-established industry. Why in the world is a BYU undergrad able to come up with something for an established industry? How did that happen? How did that work?
It's kind of a funny, twisted history. I'll tell you the story. Hewlett-Packard had a calculator they produced called the HP-48. It was a very advanced scientific calculator.
Yeah.
When I was an engineering undergrad, you're required to purchase one. Everyone used it. It had graphing functionality. It was the calculator to have in the 90s.
Yeah.
Well, that calculator got picked up by land surveyors. They have to do a lot of calculations for geometries, distance, angles, elevations, you know, how much dirt you need to come and fill in this area, or gradients for, say, a pipe, a drain pipe.
Yeah.
They needed a lot of calculation power. The calculator was more than sufficient. Several companies had written software for it.
Okay.
However, in the around 2002-ish, Hewlett-Packard, for whatever reason, decided their calculator division wasn't profitable.
Oh.
They shut it down.
Ooh.
They got such a response from the community that they opened it back up about a year later.
Yeah.
In the meantime, all the companies making software for this calculator, which was now beloved, almost sacred to the surveying community, had jumped platforms. They'd gone to Windows platforms and other things. But there's this huge installed base who wanted the same thing. Tim, since he was very young, had been playing with calculators, programming them, and it's just a hobby.
Yeah.
And he'd gotten in touch with a surveyor, and as a hobby, started writing programs for him, which developed eventually into our product, which we still sell today.
Wow. So that's really interesting, because it's like, you know, kind of a HP made a decision, all the software developers fled, they came back in, but then suddenly there weren't software developers to support the surveyors. There was a hole. That's a very interesting opportunity. And you mentioned that Tim talked to a surveyor friend. I mean, how did he spot that gap? I mean, where does it come from, you know?
Again, it was his hobby. He just loved calculators. He still today, actually today, he works now for the HP calculator division.
Perfect, a dream come true.
His dream come true. It's true. That was his dream, and he's there.
Yeah.
So these calculators, he just loved them so much. He was on a board, just online, and the guy who's a surveyor said, "Hey, I got some problems to solve." And he thought, "Wow, you know, that'd be fun to solve that problem. I'll write a program for him."
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so back to the point where you've kind of fleshed out a business plan. You go to the business plan competition. How did you do?
We did very well.
Okay, did you win?
We got second place.
Second place. Didn't discourage you, though.
Did not discourage us.
Good.
As a matter of fact, we went on from that competition. Then there's what's called the Utah Entrepreneurial Challenge, which is a statewide competition. We entered that, and again, we got second.
Oh.
This time losing to someone else.
Yeah.
We did so well there. BYU usually gets invited to a Fortune Small Business competition. We flew out to New York.
Wow.
And got second place in that competition, nationally.
Perfect.
Again, second place, but to someone else.
Yeah.
Not to be discouraged, we went on to a competition at Rice University. They have an international business plan competition. We did very well there. We got third place.
Third place.
So these were all good. We learned a lot from each one. Our business plan, you talk about evolution and change of the plan, it really evolved over about a year time span as we went through different competitions. We actually were now selling into the market by the end of the competitions. We had revenue. We were understanding truly the real issues. It was very, very fun, very exciting. And to boot, it gave us a little bit of extra cash to help run the business.
How did your business plan change the most?
I think
what areas changed?
Our distribution changed more than anything else. We had initially envisioned that majority of our customers would get our product through surveying distributors. There's hundreds of these all across the U.S. They have little storefronts. Surveyors walk in, they see products. We've seen competitors' products in these shops. We thought, hey, we'll get it into their hands, and hey, they'll sell themselves. People walk in, no problem. The reality was that didn't happen.
What part didn't happen?
The distributors didn't pick up our products.
Okay, yeah.
Distributors didn't pick it up because they had an adverse motive to pick it up. The competitor's product was several $1,000s, and these are resellers. They get a percentage.
Yeah.
So they would rather have 20 to 30% of their $3,000 rather than my product at 20 to 30% of $1,500.
Yeah.
So even though we were lower priced for similar performance, these dealers had no motivation.
Yeah, interesting.
I also found that several of them they were kind of locked up. The distributors would carry a certain brand, like in cars, a Chevy or a Toyota. Maybe they only have certain brands they can carry. Some of the dealerships could not carry our brand for fear of ruining their main distributorship.
Yeah, that's great. So some good lessons there as you get into, I mean, distribution is a big deal. Sometimes it seems easy. I mean, one of the things I would have been worried about was, well, if you're selling to all these distributors, that's a lot of work to go out to each one and kind of pitch it to them. And then, you know, you find out some of these, their incentives are aligned differently, some of the relationships are locked up. So what did you do to adjust to that? How do you?
We didn't have a lot of choice.
Okay.
Some of the distributors we did get into, a few of them. You talk about going to all the distributors. I went to distributors in Utah, Nevada, California, Arizona, person to person talking to the owners. I went to some in just all over the country. Some in Ohio, some in Tennessee, trying to get in the door with these folks. It was very difficult to get in the door. What we ended up doing is mainly print advertising and a little web URL. We get the vast majority of our orders over the internet. Yeah,
that's great. So you had to make an adjustment, but it sounds like it worked out well. Tell me more about growing and pushing, you know, surveying tools from there. What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome those? One was distribution. Were there other challenges, or were there some good surprises? Tell me what it was. How did you grow and develop it?
Yeah, there was lots of interesting surprises. It turns out each surveyor has kind of a different way of approaching a task. And so we had to change the way our software worked so we could adapt to any of them pretty fluidly. We also found out that they have extremely low tolerance for data loss. So if you accidentally lose a piece of their data, they're really upset. I took a surveying class at BYU because I wanted to figure out, you know, what do these guys actually do? Since I'm running the company, I'd better know. And what I found out is it takes a lot of time to take even one point. And if you set up a couple points, and you've taken a couple of very precise points, accurate to within millimeters, and somebody loses your data, you've lost time. They're ticked. We knew that to some degree in advance, but that became very clear in our minds quite quickly. We also found out going into it a lot about support. Lots of the big companies, they have, you know, call between the hours of 9 to 5 Central Time, and outside that, no luck. We found many of our customers like to call us on Saturdays, evenings, and Sundays, and early morning. And so it's the support issue. How do we deal with support? And some of these people are, some are smarter than others, some are easier for customer support, and some of them just were painful. You know, hours on the phone and the customer's just not getting it. So we had to figure out how to deal with those. We're remote. We can't go all over the country visiting them, so how do we do remote customer support and do it consistently well?
Great points, and you know, kind of the theme again is you had to make all these adjustments and be very fluid as you kind of discovered what, you know, hidden things the customer wanted. I'm curious about that last one. How did you solve that customer support problem?
We've done it several ways. One of the ways is, this is electronics. So we came up with a little module we can actually ship to a customer, hook up to their unit, collect data, and have them send it back to us. We can also take a lot of their files, even over email, and say, oh, you had a problem, what's the problem? Have them describe it to us, and we send it back. They send it over email, we can sometimes solve it there. We've also done things where in the hardware, we've made some special reset functionality. So almost like a computer support, you call up and this guy says, reboot the computer. We have a special button there, master reboot. Hold this button down for 3 seconds and everything will be better.
That's great.
Put it back to a default state.
That's great. Good creative solutions. So what happened to precision surveying tools? What was the...
Precision surveying, the biggest thing that happened is the housing downturn. As you know, we've had a massive downturn in housing. And surveying is all about measuring the land. So when construction falls, our customers' demand falls. So I've had many discussions with distributors and individuals all across the country on what's happening to their business. And it's falling off even more precipitously than the general housing market. This is capital equipment. So capital equipment usually falls fast, and then it's on top of the housing fall, and it really fell hard. I had a customer I was talking to in the Midwest who said his business was down 90% year over year.
Wow.
Another customer in Florida called, said it's the worst year he's ever had in the 20-plus years he's been in business.
Wow.
Another surveying firm in the Midwest, they had 10 surveying crews of 2 or 3 people each. They're down to 2. They have excess equipment.
Wow, amazing. So kind of an external economic shock you couldn't control. So what is the response? I mean, is precision surveying tools, did you decide to shut it down for now, or is it kind of, budget on a string? What's kind of happening with it?
Budget on the string probably describes it best. So we cut back employees down to 0. Now the founders just have a somewhat time-consuming hobby we do on the side. I wouldn't even call it terribly profitable. We'll make a little bit, but not as much as, certainly not enough to compensate for our time. Our marketing budget, I had to pull that back hard. We were spending thousands of dollars every month on print ads. Very expensive, but national coverage. How else we're going to get people to come to our website? We had to pull that back significantly. So we pulled that far back. We've also gone to a little bit more of a push with our current customers. We've taken the existing customer base and we spend a little bit more time with them on newsletters and other things, so we get repeat business. Most of our business right now is actually repeat business from our existing customer base.
So morphing, I mean, you have to adjust when the environment hits you, and so it sounds like both kind of cutting back and weathering the storm, as well as morphing kind of how you connect to customers. Now that's not the only thing you're doing. You're also involved with IMSAR and their NanoSAR. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or is that kind of secretive?
Some of it is, but I can tell you a fair amount about it. It's really exciting. I just love it. So excuse me if I get too exuberant. We are doing imaging radar for miniature spy planes.
Sounds
this
very
is
exciting.
Cool stuff. I get to play with airplanes, and I get to play with cool electronics and just a fantastic team of engineers. We fly on an airplane. It's about a 6-foot wingspan, 6 to 10 feet wingspan area. The whole plane weighs 40 pounds. I can hold it with one hand. And we've gone and taken a radar system and fit it into this little tiny airplane. The airplane, it's just fantastic. We launch it from a catapult. There's no runway. You can launch it therefore from a ship or a desert, any place you want. Just hook up the catapult and launch it. Recovery, again, there's no airstrip required. It literally gets caught by a string. The rope hanging from a boom. The plane flies into it. A rope hits the wing, slides along the wing, and gets caught by a little hook at the end of the wing. And the airplane spins around the rope, and you go out there and lower the rope down, and you've recovered your airplane.
That's great.
So with the obvious engagements that the U.S. government has overseas, they're using these planes quite a bit. And no one else in the market has been able to shrink the radar down this size.
So how did you get involved with this? Again, where did this come from?
Well, here's a key, and this I think is a key for anyone who's involved in entrepreneurship. It was a relationship.
Relationships matter.
They matter a tremendous amount. I stumbled upon this one. I was at a 4th of July celebration and ran into a man who was my graduate advisor in engineering about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Chatted with him, we decided we'd have lunch, met with him, and then he showed me around a facility of a new company that he'd started a few years ago.
Yeah.
They've grown themselves fantastically well, about 50 employees or so. And as he showed me around, he said, hey, I want to introduce you to a couple of people. This is the man who's our current chief technology officer and my former chief engineer. The chief engineer has now spun off a new company. He's the CEO, and they're just getting it started. I walked into the room, and this CEO, I said, Adam Robertson, how are you? I said, who are you? I didn't know who he was. He recognized me, and he said, I've read your work. I said, what are you talking about? He'd read my thesis, something I thought no one would ever read.
Yeah, wow.
And it turns out that the technology he was working on was an extension of his graduate work, which was partially a piece of what I was doing for my graduate work.
Yeah, wow.
So I started consulting with them. They invited me to come consult. I helped them get the first big contract with a major defense contractor with Boeing. And upon getting that successfully, they asked if I'd join them full time.
Cool.
And I said, I'm on.
Yeah.
Let's go it. Let's go do it.
Work with cool planes. How has the IMSAR experience been different than your previous experiences? I mean, what kind of stands out to you as different about IMSAR? I mean, obviously it's in a market that's a little bit more robust to the downturn, being military and defense. But what other things have you noticed that you say, well, I look back on my other experiences, this is different?
A lot of it's actually the same, surprisingly so the same.
Good.
We struggle with lots of the same issues. So how are we going to take this to market? What's the distribution channel? Who are our first customers? What does the customer really want? What is the real job they're trying to accomplish? All of those are very much similar.
Wow. So wait, you're telling me that whether you're in a corporation or you're trying to sell to government or you're in a new startup, you have to worry about all those same issues?
All those issues, they don't go away.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly right, yeah. I agree with you 100%. Well, this has been great to hear about your experiences, but surely kind of over the course of all this, you've developed kind of some rules of thumb or some kind of tidbits of wisdom. What would you say to the students here today and those watching about, you know, entrepreneurship in whatever setting?
Peter Drucker said something, I'm going to paraphrase what he said, but it's essentially that you don't plan for a great career, but rather you prepare for one. And what he says there is not that you plan, okay, I'm going to go work for Intel, and then I'm going to work up this corporate chain till I'm whatever role. More that you're prepared. So, for example, this IMSAR company I'm involved with now, something I'd done 10 years ago in my graduate work was part of the preparation. I couldn't have planned for this company to come along, but I was prepared for it when the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah.
The surveying, you know, I didn't ever plan, say as an undergrad, to say I'm going to own a company that does surveying equipment. That wasn't the plan, but I was prepared for it through my past experience, my MBA, etc. So in our careers, I don't think we can necessarily plan every detail, but what we can do is be prepared for the opportunities when they present themselves.
That's a great point, and actually something I firmly believe in, that you should follow what feels right to you and exciting to you, and things will happen that you might not have expected. They're surprises, but prepare. And in a way, another good lesson is, I mean, you obviously did a good job at every step of the way, you know, in your graduate thesis, you know, at HP and at all the things. And so, you know, rather than kind of saying, well, you know, what does my graduate thesis really matter? I'm going to go into industry, you know. You could easily have slacked off, and yet look at how that kind of interesting research played out to your benefit later on. So that's a good point. What else would you suggest for the students?
One thing I see from students in particular, and it's often the public at large, is often I think we're too reserved with our ideas.
Okay.
Say, hey, I got this great idea. It's going to make millions of dollars. Oh, if I can just find the funding for it, but you know, I better not share too much, because if I share too much, someone might steal the idea and take it away and run with it.
Yeah.
Well, number one, if the idea is that easy to steal and run with, it probably wasn't worth very much anyway.
Good point.
And two, I think there's been some studies done that indicate that in general, the intellectual property piece of what people do is only a few percentage points of revenue. 1 or 2%, it's very small. In general, you benefit much more from sharing ideas, bouncing it off people, opening it up a little bit. Don't be so afraid of that.
Yeah.
The real value is your ability to execute on the idea, not the idea itself.
Okay. So execute, meaning what in this kind of setting?
In this case, execute as simply to make a load of money off of it.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Back in, I think it was in the 70s, there was the ankle weights that were in vogue.
Okay.
Everyone was wearing ankle weights around, you remember?
Yeah.
Probably most audiences too young to remember that.
Ankle weights were big.
They were huge.
Yeah.
I don't know which company came up with that first, but whoever it was probably made a boatload of money.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out I know a man who had thought of that idea before they became in vogue.
Yeah.
He was a physical therapist by training, and he thought, wow, that'd be really cool. We actually use these in the therapy. This could be good for the public at large.
Yeah.
General strength training, put them on their ankles, put them on their wrists. Wow, we could make a lot of money off of this. He had a great idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was the first, but he had it before they were in vogue. But someone else executed on it. Someone else now lives in the mansion.
Yeah. It's a couple good points. I really like what you said about share your ideas. Another well-known entrepreneur who I heard say something similar was, nobody else is going to be passionate enough about your idea to really take it through all the steps it takes to make it successful, which kind of ties together your other point, which is execution. Ideas are a dime a dozen is another phrase I've heard, and what matters is your ability to get stuff done and to do something with it. And so that's a great point. Well, thank you, Adam, very much. What I'd like to do is turn it over to the students to see what kind of questions they might have. What questions do we have for Adam? Please.
You have ideas all the time, and you are reserved because you're kind of like, somebody's already had that idea. I mean, right now I just recently had an idea. I was like, what if while you're in your car you could voice a text so people would stop crashing into each other, and it would somehow go into text format, and you could say read back, and it reads back the text, and you say send text.
Yeah.
And then there'd be less accidents.
Yeah.
Somebody's bound to have thought of that before.
Yeah.
So how do you, as an entrepreneur, know whether or not you're 3 laps behind in the race of that idea?
Okay, I'll answer that. I've thought about that quite a bit. One of the things I encourage all the students to do is to keep an idea log. I hope you're keeping one right now. Every idea you come up with, write it down, write what it is, even if it sounds kind of silly, like maybe you go, someone else has thought of that, Verizon maybe is coming out with that next month, who knows. But write it down anyway. Then I have extensive idea logs. I keep it on my desktop, a little icon, I click on that, boom, I make another little text entry. Sometimes the entry is 1 line, sometimes it's 3 paragraphs. Then you can go back and review it, let it sit for a little while. And your real question is, how do you know if someone else hasn't already come up with it?
Right.
You don't, initially. There's a lot you can find out just by a little research. I've taken several of those ideas that I thought were the most promising ones and gone, do a little basic background, spend an hour, look online for it, start chatting with people, start talking to people who are kind of in that industry. And after you kind of get into it, you kind of figure out, it's like walking into a room you're unfamiliar with. You kind of got to fill it out, see where things are placed. And in that industry, you're going to find out kind of who the players are eventually and who to deal with, how it's structured, who the power players are, kind of who the wimpier players are. So there's a whole bunch of things you can do in research. And you know what I found on my ideas? In every single case, someone else has already thought of it. But in several cases, no one's executed on it. And so it's not in the market. In this case, I'm wondering if anybody's executed on it yet. I bet you it's in the works somewhere, but have they finished it? Have they done it? I don't know.
Because like the Ford Focus has that, you talk to your Ford Focus, whatever.
Yeah.
You combine that technology with text messaging, and there's less accidents.
Yeah. And then as you look into it, I think the temptation as human beings is to not look, because then, maybe somebody else has done it. Oh, but it'd be way better go out and do that basic research, feel out who's in the room, and you may find that your idea changes and switches. But you know, you've got a great point, which is there's even a term for this, creative synchronicity. And the idea that a lot of times people come up with the same idea. And you see this in technology, you know, television being invented right here in Provo, Utah, and somewhere else at the same time, you know. And so that's okay. You just got to find out who else is doing it. Are they executing on it well? Are they executing on it poorly? Are they doing it in a way that's different than I envision? And do I believe there's something really compelling about what I'm doing that would differentiate me in an important way? I mean, I'm shocked at how many voice over IP companies continue to be successful and how they find new angles to do that. You know, and I could go on. Social networking. I mean, come on, after MySpace and Facebook, who would have believed? But you know what? It keeps evolving into, like, for example, niche social networks that are suddenly immensely popular and have a little different revenue model. And you know, there's ways to find new angles on an idea, and if you kind of keep pushing it, you know, you can either realize, wow, this space has been killed, or you know what, maybe somebody's here, but I'm thinking of a little different ways. That's a good one. Other questions for Adam?
Good question. There's always ideas coming to my mind, but whenever I realize the risk, soon I'm not even going farther after that. So what would you say? Like, does that risk was naturally? I mean, did you know, being an entrepreneur, was it naturally? Because some entrepreneurs, they just like to take risks. You know, any idea, they just like to take risks. And you know, so.
If it was easy, someone else would have already done it. And if there's not risk, guaranteed someone else has already capitalized on that. I think there's always going to be some risk associated with a new venture. And then it becomes a question about you personally. How much risk are you willing to tolerate? I think you're actually in a really unique position. I mean, I have a wife and family. I have a house. I have cars. I have a lot to lose. Frankly, students usually don't have much to lose. Go for it. Take a little risk. Do it intelligently. Don't compromise, say, getting your degree. Make sure you do some basic things like that. You know, don't go into exorbitant amounts of debt, but take some reasonable risk. I've heard many entrepreneurs say, if I had known how hard it was going to be, if I had known how risky it was, I would have never done it. And I think that's the case. Sometimes another definition of an entrepreneur is something along the lines of an entrepreneur is someone who has ambition that extends beyond what they can reasonably control. They think they can control things they really can't. They just go for it. They basically do it. They influence things that are really beyond their realm. And that's, I think, a lot of what makes them successful. They go for it.
Yeah. Another thought on that, too, is to take small steps. You know, if you have an idea you really passionately believe could be interesting, do exactly what Adam said, which is start talking to people and start talking to customers. And those customers will reflect back to you, you know what, that's really cool. I'm very interested in that. Or they'll say, oh yeah, that's interesting, you know, and it just kind of glosses over and you know, it's not time to jump yet. A final thought is, you know, use times like time in school to incubate ideas. It's a great time to be fooling around with stuff like that. Work with another entrepreneur. Find an opportunity to work with somebody else who's kind of been beaten up in the school of hard knocks a little bit, and you can kind of learn from them. And then lastly, you know, you can always. I mean, you were very entrepreneurial at HP, and we've had some discussions in here about that. But you know, you've got to do it ethically. But you can play around on the side a little bit in a way that, you know, tests things out, the water. All right. Well, thank you, Adam, for coming. It's been great. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.